The laptop. You hear us now, Sure. Great. All right, I think we can be heard now. Is that projecting right? I don't think it's matching. This isn't really. Can I share on the screen? All right, so back to slide 4. Sorry about that. We have, what, 5 days to get the technical issues correct? Thanks for your patience. So I was talking about Article 2, the FY 2025 operating budget. So in the left column, you can see the current fiscal year's budget. And then in FY 25, you can see the new total. You can see the divisions: general government, finance, public safety, public works, public services, and the public schools. This year's budget does include an operating override to cover the cost to continue operating the Provincetown's, the school department's early learning center. So town meeting body in 2018 supported via an override of over $300,000 to create and support Provincetown residents and the children of town employees to attend the early learning center. We've added a third classroom to the serving 49 children. We had about 9 students, all 9 of which were children of Provincetown employees or Provincetown residents themselves that were on the waiting list. And so with the expansion, we were able to serve everyone on that list. And so included in the Article 2 motion is the acceptance and passage of the $373,000 operating override. There in the yellow box, and this will be in the town meeting booklet, is the estimated annual tax impact, $7.53 per $100,000 of assessed value on a median residential property tax bill valued at $910,000 is about $68 per year. Article 3, another recurring article, is the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School assessments for Provincetown 6 students to attend Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. Article 4, so Article 2 is the general fund budget. Article 4 are our enterprise fund budgets. And this article includes both the Water Enterprise Fund and the Wastewater Enterprise Fund. In the box, you can see the comparison between 24 and 25. The enterprise funds are essentially self-sufficient, and so the revenues of the water department and the wastewater department bring in cover the operating expenses. Article 5, another annual article, the public education government access cable related fund acceptance. Through Comcast bills, users in town pay a small fee to Comcast that is then provided to the town, and town meeting vote is needed to appropriate those funds to Provincetown Community Television. Article 6, another financial article. So the town of Provincetown received its portion of settlement funds as part of the state's resolution to hold large corporations that flooded Massachusetts with dangerous opioids. Provincetown was party to a number of those lawsuits and settlements. Over the last year, any funds that the town was sent were deposited into the general fund. We're required to segregate those funds, and so we're removing the $46,000 that were deposited into the general fund into a opioid settlement fund that will go towards addiction treatment programs, mental health programs that the town is working on with other Outer Cape communities. And so this is our first free cash transfer of town meeting. And so in the yellow box, you'll see that we're starting town meeting with a free cash balance of just over $4,012,000. Article 7, another financial article, also includes a free cash appropriation, as well as an appropriation from the excess funds in the tourism fund. So in October, we had a special town meeting. The purpose of that town meeting, first and foremost, was to get town meeting to consider the purchase of 22 and 24 Nelson Ave for future housing development. At the time, voters approved short-term borrowing, given that we didn't have the capital stabilization or free cash certified in order to make a purchase directly. And so the promise from the administration and the board at the time was that we would pay off the short-term borrowing as quickly as we could, hopefully at annual town meeting in April. And so that is our plan. The total purchase price was $2,035,000. We are using $800,000 from the housing fund, which has already been approved by the select board and the Community Housing Council, and those funds are not subject to town meeting appropriation, which leaves a gap with the rest of the funds we need to pay off the property. So this article would transfer $885,000 from free cash and $350,000 from unappropriated money tourism fund, and the Nelson Ave purchases would be completely paid off. Article 8. Another financial article. I will mention at the onset that we will get to the capital improvement plan, Community Preservation Act, and other financial articles. When we look at capital projects in town, we typically go to both our free cash account and the capital stabilization fund to fund as many CIP projects as possible from the money available to us. This is the only debt exclusion capital project on the warrant. And so a debt exclusion essentially is allowing the town to go above and beyond Proposition 2.5 and is directly funded by an increase in the taxes. And so we'll talk about what that is in the context of this project in particular. This article, Article 8, the Mata Field Master Plan redevelopment. Just for some background, 1 year ago at annual town meeting, voters approved funds to start the master planning process. That process has gone on for a little over 9 months. In October at special town meeting voters approved $250,000 to advance the design and estimating and the engineering of the Mata Field Master Plan. And that allowed us to get to where we are today with the plan and with a final cost estimate for the completion of the work. And so our plan over the last year has been to design the field, design the park, do community engagement, and come back April 2024 for voters' consideration of this project. The design improves ADA accessibility, connectivity. It's a multi-generational active and passive recreational park, while also being a flexible space that can host community events and provide a gathering space for the entire community. Mata Field is incredibly underutilized today, and there's a number of assets that will be included in the design. The design includes a 400-meter track, regulation soccer and Little League fields, a skate park. The town did have a skate park at one time where the new police station is, and so there has been conversation about relocating that skate park for several years. The park includes shuffleboard, bocce courts, play equipment for kids, and outdoor fitness equipment. It includes pickleball and tennis courts, a community plaza for gatherings, and a multi-use pavilion with picnic tables and public restrooms. As I mentioned before, this will make the park ADA accessible for folks of all physical disabilities. Right now, the park is not accessible through Winslow Street and is for folks to access. We recognize that this is a significant investment for the town. I will say at the onset, this would be borrowed over a 15-year period. Unlike other debt exclusions, when it comes to parks and public spaces, we're only allowed to borrow upwards of 15 years. We can't borrow over a longer term period than the 15 years per state law. This is an aerial image of the park. And so you can see the regulation baseball field, soccer field. You can see the track that takes up some pretty substantial space. On the sort of southeast end of the aerial view, you'll see tennis courts and pickleball courts. And you probably really can't see it, but in between the courts and the field itself is the play equipment, the bocce and shuffleboard.
Until we need.
All right, so these are other angles of the park. So this is from the Winslow Street view. So if you were to walk through the park, you'd see again the courts on the right, some of the other amenities, picnic tables, shade trees, the track, and then the bottom right photo is the view Alden Street from the other end of the track. A couple of other images. The motion to appropriate funds will approve the next phase of the project, which will be to complete construction of the park. The motion will have to appropriate the full amount of the project cost, as the Land and Water Conservation Fund grants are reimbursable grants, and after invoices are paid, the town will submit a grant reimbursement request from that program. Similar to the Cannery Wharf project that we broke ground on recently, we are in line for $1 million grant from the Land and Water Conservation Fund that would directly lower the cost of this project. And so on the bottom right, you can see the estimated annual tax impact, $23.50 per $100,000 of assessed value per year. Again, the median value, home value in town of $910,000 comes out to about $180 per year for 15 years. A debt exclusion, again, is not a permanent adjustment to your taxes. Once the project's paid for, it falls off. In this case, it would be over a 15-year period. And again, this assumes that the project will cost the full $11.7 million. And again, we're confident that we're in line for $1 million grant to mitigate the impact to taxpayers. The warrant also includes a contribution from Community Preservation Act funds to further lower the total cost of the project. And the budget also includes contingency. And so it is a conservative estimate, and our hope and plan would be to reduce that price both with grants and efficiencies throughout the implementation process. Jeff?
I don't know if we know the answer to this question, but do we have an estimate of the wastewater treatment plant starting on the construction? So the timeline for those two chunks of construction.
Oh, use the mic.
Yeah, so Jeff asked, so if you do ask a question, probably for the, and if you could use the microphone. Jeff asked about the sequencing and timing of the work and his assumption that the sewer disposal bed work would happen in line with the park construction project. And so as part of the approvals from special town meeting, not this past fall, but fall of 2022, as part of the sewer expansion project, voters approved the plan to relocate disposal beds that are currently under the soccer field on Route 6 to Mata Field as part of the expansion project. And so essentially, yes, the project will be sequenced to have some efficiencies in terms of the planning process. So step one would be the moving of the disposal beds to Mata Field, and then park construction would hopefully begin immediately after that work is complete. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So total like a year for the beds and then another 18 months for the field, something like that.
As far as I know, the relocation of the beds won't take a year. Our hope is that work would begin in spring of 2025.
Okay.
And then the park work would also begin in calendar year 2025. And depending on the budget, there will obviously be an impact. The soccer field will be available for school use and public use while Mata Field is out of sort of commission. And there is a recommendation that we have sort of 2 full seasons to strengthen the grass and things like that. So there will be a schedule at some point in terms of implementation of the park and when it's going to be fully available to the public. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Two questions somewhere. One is from me and the others is from other people. So here we go. The first thing is, first of all, it's a beautiful mark element.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Pardon?
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Pat Miller. I live on Pearl Street. I also happen to be the president of the PRTA, which is the Provincetown Taxpayers Association. But anyway, so the first question I has to do with changing residency. I'm going to take this argument in a minute. I can see what it is. 20 has to do with changing residency, meaning allowing. And I think there are some people who think that raises safety issues. But the reason given for that is that so if you're looking at a housing crisis where we're willing to sacrifice a little bit of safety with respect to where Fire Street lives, I was wondering if in the course of the 9 months, there was questions about priorities, that is affordable housing. We've had 2 town meetings on this very topic with respect to
meeting in private and coming together with the amenities for the park. This was going out into the public, getting feedback. What do folks want to see at the park? And again, at the end of the day, we have to bring this to town meeting, and it's up to the voters as to whether or not we make this investment. We have checked in with our financial advisors. Is there any negative financial impact to our bond rating, to our borrowing capacity, given we may have other needs on the horizon? They said definitively, and we talked about this at the Finance Committee meeting, which, by the way, the Finance Committee voted 7-2, our financial watchdogs, to recommend this project at the full $11.7 million amount. And again, I would just say this park hasn't seen investment in over 50 years. There are folks who live in town now that do have housing. There are students in our public schools, upwards of 180 of them, that will utilize this park. And so again, I really don't like, and not from you, just folks in general, and this will come up at town meeting, to pit this project against housing, to pick the police station against other projects. I think this town has the capacity to invest in this park and still invest in other priorities.
I mean,
Yes.
that was that question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good, I mean, of course, there's going to be questions and conversations about priorities and other competing interests. And as I said at the onset, this is a debt exclusion, and we do try to limit the number of debt exclusions that we go to the voters with, right? Our investments in affordable and community housing haven't been debt exclusions. We've used CIP money and free cash, excess in the tourism fund, for example. The sewer expansion project is not a debt exclusion, so it's not a direct increase in general fund taxes for people that live here or people that don't live here. It's paid via betterments and state and federal funding and USDA grants, and that was outlined back in fall of 2022. The point of the community engagement process was really to talk directly to different stakeholders, from parents to children to students to year-round residents to seasonal visitors to second homeowners. And this park really does include something for everyone and for everyone at different ages. And so again, this is the park that incorporates, I think, everything but the big saltwater pool that some folks asked for, which would have probably added another few $1 million, if not more, to the project. And at the end of the day, this is going to be decided. It needs a 2/3 majority on Monday night and needs a majority vote on the ballot in May if it passes town meeting. If this doesn't advance on Monday night, then we go back to the drawing board. Are there other alternative ways? Are there things that we can value engineer from the park? Does it need to include every one of these components based on feedback? But this is the vision of the park that all of the stakeholders that attended meetings over 9 months coalesced around.
So just for clarity, that there was conversation for something smaller, but the idea was at the end, this would satisfy the needs of various people, various stakeholders, or people that had expressed the design preference.
Yeah, and it was maximizing the usable space too. So the purpose of the investment of the retaining wall added a lot more usable space for the park too. So, there are likely things that could be cut from any project, but the likelihood of us coming back in the future to be able to use that space is slim to none. And so, we think this is a, opportunity now to make this investment. Otherwise, staggering an investment over time will likely cost just as much, if not more, And so we have the opportunity to go for grants that we have in the past. You know, Cannery Wharf was a great example. Town meeting authorized 1.8 million, and we got a $750,000 grant from the state to offset that. And so we do have to get full funding, but you know, I think we have demonstrated that we've worked incredibly hard to mitigate the cost even after getting approval from the voters.
And the other question was on maintenance. So obviously there's an initial investment for it, but then a complex of this size requires some sort of budget item line, I would imagine, every year for maintenance. What does that number look like?
Yeah, so we're not predicting any real increase in maintenance related to the investments in the park. We have added 2 new full-time year-round employees to the DPW. Not in this budget, but the 2 previous fiscal year budgets, including buildings and grounds for landscaping and things like that. The DPW already, you know, manages the field in terms of mowing the lawn, other things related to the park, maintenance, things like that. This park will add additional storage capacity to protect some of the equipment. We'll actually limit the need to have to constantly transport equipment from the VMCC and other facilities to Mata Field. The pavilion also will limit the need to rent tents for special events. And then there are rentals of pavilions and things like that, which generate revenue for the revolving funds within the recreation fund that are often utilized to offset any of those, you know, one-time expenses that may pop up throughout the year.
So I apologize for taking the time to say your answer. Is there maintenance already in the saying that the number right now that DPW has for maintenance is enough to cover maintaining this particular complex?
Yes, so the general fund budget, Article 2, that includes the DPW, includes maintenance not just for Mata Field, but for every public space and park that we have. And it hasn't increased as a result of the project.
Plants around here that are this DPW's enough budget to take care of a complex as impressive as what you just showed us.
Well, over the last 2 years, like I said, we've added 2 new full-time people to help take on additional capacity. So,
All right, I think that covered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions about Mata Field, John?
Thanks, I appreciate it. And like I said, and as mentioned, fantastic project. What is the policy for dogs? On all parts or any parts of this?
Great question.
Yeah.
So great question. I think that's something we need to look into. Obviously, we're going to spend $11.7 million. We need some public input on that decision making, right? So the Recreation Commission oversees all of the recreational parks. So once we know that we have approval of this project, the Rec Commission will have to take that up and go over the park guidelines and whether that's, you know, dogs on the field or smoking or anything of that rules of the certainly be discussed. But you know, with such a financial impact, there certainly needs to be that discussion. So don't have an exact answer for you, but it's certainly something that needs to be discussed going forward.
And just for folks at home who may not have heard, the question was, is there going to be a dog policy at Mata Field? Do we have a dog park in town? Mata Field question before I move on to Article 9. Jamie?
Yes, I wonder if there's a tracking method for that we can see what we voted on in the past, when that expires.
Of like debt exclusions over time,
Yeah.
and a debt schedule. Yeah. So the speaker asked about sort of debt exclusions and tax impact over time, and so debt, and as you allude to, debt does fall off. So debt exclusions that have been approved in the past fall off, other debt comes on, and so, you know, over time it sort of evens out depending on the schedule. So there is a debt summary that will be at the beginning of the town meeting booklet. There's debt that is considered within the limits of Proposition 2.5, which is debt that the town takes on and pays out of the general fund debt service. And then there's excluded debt, which would be for something like the Mata Field project, the police station project, for example, that was approved by voters 2 years ago. We could do an analysis, and the debt schedule to some extent in the booklet does show between 2024 and 2040, and it has a total on the right. So you can see like the debt service in the budget for FY25 is $200,000 less than it was in 2024. So debt service is coming down, but we are going to be doing our final borrowing for the police station. And so those things fluctuate, but we can take a closer look at that.
So this 11.7 figure does not include the $1 million grant you anticipate, but does include the 200 from CPA?
It doesn't include either. So
okay.
We were recommended for the $1 million grant, and it has to get approved by the federal government in September. The federal government has never reversed the state recommendation, so we're confident, but we don't want to make any assumptions or lower it to 10.7 and show that tax impact. We want to be honest and transparent about the maximum potential impact to taxpayers as a result of the project. And I but also in the context of taxes for year-round residents and year-round property owners that do get the residential tax exemption, certainly something to factor in when it comes to significant investments like the Mata Field, like the police station, and other projects. Article 9 is General Stabilization Fund. This is an article we try to do every year. We've done it the last few years. Transfers $100,000 from free cash to the General Stabilization Fund, also known as a rainy day fund. To spend from the fund, you need 2/3 approval from town meeting. And so this is an effort for the town to build up its general purpose stabilization for if there's ever a rainy day where the town would need to use the stabilization funds. We do have a policy and an ambition to have a stabilization fund that's equal to 10% of the general fund operating budget. Right now, we'll be at around 8.33%. And so there's still more work to do to get that fund up, but it has grown. It's grown over time in dollar amount. It's growing a little bit slowly in terms of percentage. Article 10, delay implementation of the airport enterprise fund. So at special town meeting in October, voters approved the creation of an airport enterprise fund. This article asks for there to be a 1-year extension so that the enterprise fund does not take effect this coming July 1, but will take effect July 1, 2025. And this will allow for more time to complete negotiations on a lease with Cape Air. And then the town and the airport are also in the middle of negotiations with the National Seashore and the National Park Service, which is taking longer than expected. The federal government has had a special use permit with the town for operation of the airport, and they're now requiring there to be a long-term lease. There's only one other town in the Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in the country that has a long-term lease for federal land. And so we're working with their team to get that done. But as a result, we think it's important to delay the implementation of the fund until we finalize these two agreements. Those were some of the initial budget and financial articles. And we're going to transition into Community Preservation Act. Article 11, so every year town meeting considers Community Preservation Act appropriations. The first article, Article 11, will rescind prior appropriations from town meeting. And so essentially these are projects that either didn't happen, came under budget, were offset by grants. And so over about $200,000 is being returned from already approved projects back into the CPA pool to then be distributed to new projects. And so Article 11 rescinds the prior approval, which is required, and then we're able to loop that money back into availability of funds for projects coming up. And so that gets us into Article 12, which is the FY25 Community Preservation Budget. The Community Preservation Committee makes the recommendations, accept applications for how to spend these funds. Part 1, you can see open space, historic resources, community housing. just going to go through the different categories and different projects that the CPC recommended to town meeting. You can see money towards the Community Housing Council and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, money for a Housing Assistance Corporation project, community housing, open space. This is where the 200,000 for the Mata Field Master Plan project, CPA. I think we'll also look to apply for more CPA funds before the next annual town meeting to further offset that cost. More open space, historic preservation. Any questions on CPA before we move to CIP? All right, so Article 13 is similar to the CPA. Town meeting has authorized capital improvement projects in the past, and these are projects that came in under budget or were offset by grants. And so we're asking town meeting to rescind 266,000. Again, we had authorization to spend that money. We didn't spend it, and so we're asking that it be returned back into the capital stabilization to offset new requests in the CIP. And then Article 14 begins the FY25 capital improvement program. No projects within Article 14, the CIP, or debt exclusion. So every single one of these projects is funded either by free cash or from the capital stabilization. So what that means is there'll be no impact to your taxes, similar to the Mata Field project, or different, I should say, from the Mata Field project. And then we divide this by funding source. And so there's a number of capital projects that are funded by free cash, and then a different set of projects that are funded by the capital stabilization. These are the list of projects funded from free cash. And so when you get your town meeting booklet, again, it's available online, will be available around town hall over the next couple of days, and then every voter will get one coming into town meeting on Monday. There'll be more information about every one of these projects in the CIP. And there's information in the warrant that's in the back of the room as well. Capital stabilization, this is the list of projects. The CIP projects within the enterprise fund, a little bit different than the general fund. These are funded through their retained earnings. Again, the enterprise funds are self-sufficient, have no impact on general fund taxes. These are also not debt exclusions. Right, Article 15. Article 15 and 16 are related to the Provincetown Public Pier. Prior to the establishment of the Pier Corporation in 2000, McMillan Pier, according to some, was considered to be a blighted property in need of substantial capital investment. Since the year 2000, the Pier Corp and the town have invested nearly 20 million in funding and capital improvement projects for the pier. The town manager and the select board agree that through substantial capital investments made by the town and the Pier Corporation, as well as management practices from the Pier Corp board members and leadership of the pier, have met their essential purpose for which the Pier Corporation was established back in 2000. We feel like that's been fulfilled, and that the Pier Corp is no longer needed to provide for the sound and market-based management, operation, and maintenance of the pier. We're following the language of the special act. IS Town Manager had to make a recommendation to the select board. Made that recommendation, I think, back in late January, early February. There was a public hearing on this, and the select board agreed with that recommendation. Some of the more background on this, the town and the Pier Corp have a lease agreement in place for the pier, which is due to expire about a year from now in March 2025. And we believe now is the right time to take the necessary steps to dissolve the Pier Corp prior to the expiration of the lease. If this is passed by town meeting, the town manager, we will create a new pier department as part of town government under the Department of Public Works. The pier manager will report to the Public Works Director and to the town manager. And the select board will appoint a new 5-member peer commission to provide guidance on the operation of the pier, establish and modify rates and fees, and evaluate current future improvements to pier infrastructure. So right now there is a Pier Corps board, and the select board and other stakeholders thought it was important to continue having a board structure that would work alongside the select board on capital investments, helping advise on the budget, rates and fees, as I said. And Article 15 bleeds into Article 16, would create a Provincetown Macmillan Pier Enterprise Fund. And so similar to the water and the wastewater enterprise fund, these funds are expected to be self-sufficient. Right now, essentially, town meeting doesn't necessarily appropriate the funds for the pier budget directly. They're through a line item in the 95 budget. This would create an enterprise fund budget. So back Article 4 was approval of the water budget and the wastewater budget. Town meeting would then be able to have an article to approve the enterprise fund budget for the pier. And so there would be a more transparent budget and a more transparent budgeting process that requires town meeting approval for the funds. All the funds currently, the Pier Corps has been very successful the last couple of years securing grants for future planning to offset capital expenses. All funds and grants that the Pier Corps has now remain in their retained earnings and within the enterprise fund and available for pier necessities and investments. Any questions on the Pier Corps? All right, so we'll keep it moving. Article 17 is the Shank-Painter Road and Route 6 reconstruction project, or an article related to it. I should say this has been a project that has been in the works for a number of years. This article requires town meeting approval. It allows the town to seek permission for 42 temporary easements and 20 permanent easements on approximately 2,700 square feet of land. This allows us to do the work along Shank-Painter and Route 6. Essentially, the permanent easement grants the town the right to use another person's property for an indefinite period of time. Some of the easements will likely cost funds. They are already in the CIP under a different category. And so you could see that in the CIP article, and we're likely to come back to town meeting next year for another portion of the easement funds. All right, Article 18 is the housekeeping article. Collier Street is a old street. So when I was showing you the aerial view of the Mata Field project, essentially where the proposed pickleball and tennis courts are and the play equipment, there used to be a road that went through, I think, between Winthrop Street and Alden Street, and we're required to discontinue Collier Street for work to actually happen at Mata Field. Article 19 and 20 are related to the fire department and residency. Article 19 in particular just focuses on the town charter as it relates to the fire department. Just to provide some additional context, right now the town manager hires every member of town staff except for the secretary to the select board and except for the fire chief. Per the town charter now, the Board of Fire Engineers, which is appointed by the town manager, they must elect a fire chief from within its own membership. In the warrant itself, the article was originally proposed to simply abolish the Board of Fire Engineers and add the fire chief to the list of town staff hired by the town manager and approved by the select board. And so the language there on the slide under D was the original language. As I sort of alluded to earlier, after some feedback, meetings, and conversations with members of the community, members of the call volunteer department, there were concerns about eliminating the Board of Fire Engineers altogether, but there sort of was a recognition that the town manager, and the select board did need to be involved in the selection of a fire chief. Under the amendment that I plan to make on Monday night, the town manager would continue appointing for a one-year term a Board of Fire Engineers, and the town manager shall appoint a fire chief with the approval of the select board. but the Board of Fire Engineers may recommend candidates to the town manager for appointment as fire chief. And the full amended language will be in the booklet for folks to take a look at before town meeting and obviously at town meeting.
Alex, if I could.
Oh, yeah.
Just a question. Will the, according to, with, based on that, will the fire chief chair the Board of Fire Engineers? How will the arrangement practically work in operation with the Board of Fire Engineers and the fire chief?
Yeah, so the amended language, so right now the fire chief has to come from the Board of Fire Engineers membership, which greatly limits who the fire chief can be. And also, and I'll get to this in a couple of slides, but we've gone just over the last 12 months, we've gone from a $1.5 million fire department to a $3.6 million fire department. We've gone from 2 full-time staff, the EMS coordinator and the administrative assistant, to upwards of 20 full-time staff. And this worked when we had a full volunteer department and a part-time chief. But these changes are required given that our current fire chief does need to retire in May of 2025, whether anyone wants it or not. It's required by state law. We've done a 5-year extension, and we're not allowed to go past that. So it's imminent because of the change. This would remove the requirement that the chief have to be a member of the Board of Fire Engineers, but that the Board of Fire Engineers would still exist, still be appointed by the town manager, would work alongside the fire chief on day-to-day activities. And so one of the concerns from the Board of Fire Engineers was they feel like they represent the call department. They're able to provide feedback as to the call section of the department, not necessarily the full-time EMS fire, on equipment, on history, training, outreach. And so there wasn't broad support to eliminate the Board of Fire Engineers altogether. I do think perhaps over time we may want to make additional tweaks and changes to the structure. But like I said, I think the current structure didn't lend itself to.
No, I buy, look, I buy all that. I'm solely on the basis of how one manages day to day. I buy everything you just said. I'm just saying, who's in charge?
The fire
The
chief.
fire chief? And the board is an independent body that sits along with him and works with him? Sounds kind of awkward. Or he chairs it and right now but the fire chief chairs it and they initiate. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, like, my lexicon, somebody has to be in charge. And I grant you're saying it's a fire chief, but you haven't changed any of the powers and duties of the Board of Fire Engineers,
So
which they currently would still have.
how
does that work?
Yeah, so the authority of the Board of Fire Engineers isn't.
Trying to be helpful.
Yeah, no, so I would just, and it's helpful because there's no authority expressly articulated in the town charter that provides the authority that I think you're mentioning.
Well, I only meant in the general laws, not in the.
Yes, so the charter itself already has language at the fire department that the fire chief runs the day-to-day of the fire department. And so there's no change needed in the segment of the charter that touches public safety and discusses the fire chief in particular. The charter already expressly gives the fire chief the authority to run the day-to-day, provide recommendation to the town manager on other hires in the department. The Board of Fire Engineers will not be running the day-to-day of the fire department. They're appointed by the town manager. Essentially would report to the town manager, but work alongside the fire chief. But it's the fire chief and the town manager making the day-to-day decisions.
I buy it. I will always find the word working alongside in a management structure to be awkward. And can cause problems down the road.
Yeah, and I think, and we can pull the language within the charter now that talks about the fire chief and the express authority they have already. Yeah, but there are regulations.
I'm a practical human being that only wish that what was written in paper is how it occurs in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, my original proposal was to just have the fire chief and no board. But I think we had to find room for compromise, and I think this does get us closer to where we want to be. It also allows for there to still be a role for folks that have played a role in the department for quite some time. But without the,
Look,
yeah,
I'll go with it.
Yeah.
But I am just gonna say,
Yeah.
Here, I think it's an awkward. I think it's an awkward arrangement. And I get the idea of compromise. Totally in favor of compromise.
Yeah.
I like a compromise that is an effective one, not that makes it more complicated.
Yeah, I don't think it gets more complicated. I think the current structure is awkward where I, as town manager, can appoint a deputy chief and every other member of the department, yet I don't have any say in who the chief is.
I-
And they're, yeah,
and
yeah.
Springfield, I got rid of the Board of Police Commissioners for similar reasons.
Yeah. They, unfortunately, I think they brought it back, so.
They brought it back. For the same reasons, you got rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think your feedback is helpful. And as I said, I think the original proposal was sort of in that vein to clean that up, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. It provides the town manager and the select board more oversight and accountability of the fire chief. Right now, our fire chief is only accountable to the Board of Fire Engineers, essentially a group of volunteers at the end of the day. And that's different than every other town employee. And when we're talking about an almost $4 million budget and then bringing in revenue now from ambulance billing, it's a different time. And this was really initiated again by the fact that we have to look for a new chief in the next year. So.
I'm the biggest fan of Mike, and I'm the biggest fan of Mike Travato's capacity to fight fires. One of the best in the state. That being said, as a manager, I do want to second the thing. I have never been comfortable with employees reporting to boards because this board is a more active one than others. But in general, as you're pointing out the concept of having a manager who points everybody below it and having a board where the employee reports to them is just odd in modern management for cities and towns.
Yeah.
So I agree.
I agree with that. And the charter does allow some flexibility. There's no less than 3 and no more than 7 Board of Fire Engineers. And so there is some discretion in terms of, do we want 3? Do we want 7? So I guess I'll stop there. Again, I did want to, on behalf of the board and the administration, just reiterate our commitment to the call volunteers and the role they've played in the town for decades. And we want them to continue playing a role. Our transition to a combination department is just that. So a combination department, the legal language from the state is not get rid of the call department and just have full-time people. This is a department that has full-time employees that is backed up and supported by a number of call volunteers. We still have over 40 active volunteers that show up to calls. You know, there's been some smaller fires around town just over the last few months, and we've seen them get extinguished, you know, within minutes, thanks to them. But we also had to make a change less than a year ago, last August, when Lower Cape Ambulance unexpectedly told the town that as of August 30th, they were going to cease to exist altogether. And the town had had a relationship with them for decades. And so just within the last several months, we've had to bring on 16 full-time EMT firefighters and paramedic firefighters. Our goal has been to get as many of them dual certified as possible. Given the demographic challenges and changes we have with the call volunteers, it's important that at the end of the day, we don't just have medics and EMTs in the station, we also have firefighters. And so town meeting a year ago approved an operating override within the budget to support the onboarding of 8 employees. And then we were able to transfer the Lower Cape money in the budget to hiring an additional 8 full-time employees. And so we're in a better place than we were a year ago, and we're going to continue adapting to some of those changes. I think I already expressed the fire chief and having to retire in May of 2025. Not going to repeat what I already said. Article 20 related to Article 19. So originally this article changed residency for both the police chief and the fire chief to within 45 driving miles. So 2 years ago at town meeting voters approved changing the charter to allow the DPW director to live 45 driving miles from Provincetown. Originally, this article would allow the same for both the police chief and the fire chief. After feedback again, my plan at town meeting at the beginning of Article 20 is to make an amendment to separate out both the police and the fire chief, as such that the fire chief shall be a resident of Provincetown, Truro, or Wellfleet, and shall meet the requirements of this section within 6 months of assuming office. This is direct feedback from our current fire chief and members of the fire department. Given the structure of the fire department, different than the police department, we do think that proximity to Provincetown is more critical than the police department, given the 24/7 in the leadership structure in the police department compared to the fire department. But it was clear from the fire chief and others that we've talked to that we really shouldn't have a fire chief that is anywhere beyond the Wellfleet Eastham line. And so that's the amendment that will be made. I do think it's important that we amend the charter to allow the police chief to be 45 driving miles from Provincetown. I will say that we're not legally able to require our police officers to live in Provincetown. And the vast majority of our police officers now do not live in Provincetown. One of our challenges, again, I mentioned the fire chief will be retiring. We'll also be looking at a retiring police chief within the next year in 2025. And so as we go to look for a police chief moving forward, this is going to limit our options if the residency requirement is just Provincetown and Truro. I would use the deputy chief as an example, a member of the department that's worked for the town for 13 years. Has raised a family, bought a house off Cape. For him or other folks in the department to have the opportunity to be chief, they'd essentially have to sell their home and move their entire family to Provincetown. And given the housing challenges and the high cost of living, that would be a challenge. And so again, my plan is to make an amendment to separate out both fire and police, but we are hopeful that town meeting voters will consider changing the police one to 45 driving miles. Article 21 is a home rule petition, a special act to authorize parking fines higher than allowed in general laws. Essentially, right now, it can be cheaper for a visitor to come to town, park wherever they want, get a parking ticket that costs less than the cost of parking all day in our lot. And so this would just fix our ability to be able to change the incentive structure. Just go through these. Article 22, another home rule petition to amend the year-round market rate rental housing trust. This would amend the special act. Right now, they're called the rental trust. They want to add home ownership in the 80% AMI to 200% AMI as a segment of work that they are able to work on. So right now, like I said, it just says rental. They want to add home ownership. They also want to be able to add 2 alternate positions to their board. All right, so Article 23 and Article 24 are citizen petitions. There's only 2 citizen petitions on the warrant. The first article that's petitioned is from Jean Marino. Jean wants to come on up. And so Jean, there's a couple slides here. There's a right arrow. Or if you want me to do it, I'm happy to help too.
Just play with this a little bit. Okay, I see. And how do you bring it back? Okay. Do that. I'm asking for your vote for the following non-binding citizen petition warrant article for blinking stop signs at the intersection of Commercial and Standish Streets. To see if the town will vote to request that the select board replace the 2 stop signs on Standish Street at the intersection with Commercial Street with blinking stop signs, and will install a blinking stop sign on Commercial Street at the intersection with Standish Street, or to take any other action relative thereto. I want to thank the governing body of Provincetown for allowing me to talk about safety at Lope Square and to tell my story about the tragic loss of my buddy and companion, my dog Cody. As we're all aware, Lope Square has always been the center of congestion in town, even in the off-season. Things aren't the same as they were even 10 years ago. Today we have more people and bicycles, and now we have electric bikes, scooters, electric scooters, mopeds, and pedicabs. On December 16th of this past year, my dog was run over by a pickup truck in the crosswalk on Standish and Commercial Street, which resulted in her death. She was on a short leash, short distance behind me. The driver barely gave me enough time to reach the curb, but my friend and my dog were still in the crosswalk. The driver was cited by the police with going through the crosswalk. He said he didn't see her. This could have been a small child, an elderly person, someone in a wheelchair, your beloved pet. We have a responsibility to make our town safe. There are currently 2 stop signs on Standish Street. Looking at before and after. Yeah. Okay, where am I? One near Lewis Brothers Ice Cream and the other coming from the pier. This one coming from the pier. As you can see on the slides, the current condition has stop signs at 2 corners. These should remain, and a new 3rd stop sign should be added on Commercial Street because drivers coming from the pier can't see oncoming traffic from Commercial Street. A 3-way stop would allow drivers coming from the pier to cross Commercial Street safely. We've all seen drivers roll through stop signs as if they're yield signs. People are more likely to stop when there's a blinking stop sign. This has been shown to be true at Howland and Bradford Street next to the playground. I'm asking for your vote for this article. I'm sorry, but I didn't show you. This is Commercial Street in Standish, right here. Thank you. Yeah, that's where the new stop sign should be. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, I'm Matthew Name. I really kind of want to ask, have you been working with Complete Streets? I mean, I will happily vote for a stop sign that blinks. I really, really will.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm sorry.
I will happily vote for your stop sign that blinks. Is this on? Just need to higher. All right, great. But one of the problems with this whole Loeb Square thing is that the pedestrian area is completely on level with the street. So when a pedestrian steps across that walkway, they're stepping down into traffic. A lot of European cities they raise it up. So when a car comes along and they enter into that intersection, they are being raised up and entering into the pedestrians area. And it creates a whole different mindset with drivers. And I'm really sorry about your loss.
Oh.
But that is a very dangerous section. I used to live at 349 Commercial. I keep a boat on the dinghy dock, and I live out in Standish, and it's gotten really bad, the traffic. Thank you.
Excuse me, what's your question?
There's an organization called Complete Streets, and they help advocate for pedestrian right-of-way in traffic situations like this.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. No, I mean, I love the idea, but I just think it needs a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's the question really has to do with the stop sign.
Right. I will happily vote for that, but I think we need to do a lot more.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Keith. This might be more of a question for Alex, so if you want to do it separately, but I'm curious, I know that some of the boards have votes on things like this, and I know some will avoid voting on petition articles. So does anyone know, did how we have the traffic thing every year that the board, the people, they're submitted by, the way I understand it is residents can submit suggestions on changes to traffic and parking basically once a year, and then whoever it is, traffic or whatever, can decide whether or not they support that, but they can bring it forward and then decide whether or not to make those changes. So is this the sort of thing that is typically done through that? And if it's being done through this, has anyone signed off of it, regardless of the merits of it, just on the specifics?
So I would just say, so there is an annual traffic hearing where Gene or any resident can submit a proposal. Typically, there's an internal staff review, but the select board is the governing authority of the public way, so of parking and of things like signage and stop signs and things like that. So at the annual traffic hearing, petitioners, it's a public hearing. Butters are typically notified if there's any proposed changes. And then the select board would take a vote. If a majority vote in favor of those petitions and the sign is installed or the parking is removed or added or whatever the determination is. I think this one hasn't been discussed at a traffic hearing. I don't want to speak for the select board. I think this was, it's a citizen petition, so I think they're looking for direction from the body. And so this is non-binding. So if it does pass, the select board does expect that it will be taken up at the next traffic hearing, which is typically in early November. So I think the select board is, if it's voted down at town meeting, then I don't see them considering it at a traffic hearing. If it's voted for, then I see them considering it at a traffic hearing. All right, Article 24. We have Elias, Duncan, and Brent.
Hey everyone, I'm Elias Duncan. This is Brent Daly. I think most of us know here that in recent years, national hospitality firms have been buying up our inns, B&Bs, hotels in Provincetown. And now together they own 40% of the hotel rooms here. Today, so companies with no real connection to Provincetown that have really no stake in our community's welfare now hold a significant amount of power in our community. And I think we can say that by allowing this concentration of ownership to grow, we are enabling the monopolization of our hotel industry, which means granting these corporations undue control over our lodging costs and the livelihoods of our hospitality workforce. The shift towards corporate homogeneity also threatens to dilute the unique character of Provincetown. This could pave the way to a future where franchise hotel chains overshadow our local charm and heritage. For those of you who don't know, a few months back, Linkris, which now owns most of the hotel rooms in Provincetown, announced that they were transforming the Cape Codder Resort, which is in Hyannis, which was run by a family for about 20 years, into a Margaritaville, which is the hotel franchise that's Jimmy Buffett themed. So in an effort to preserve the diversity and competition of the hotel industry in Provincetown, Brett and I have petitioned a general bylaw amendment, which would limit the number of lodging licenses to 3 per legal entity. So no single person or corporation can continue to dominate our lodging industry any further than it already has.
I think that that's a great summary, and whether or not this does pass, I have really enjoyed the conversation that it started, I think, in town and also with town government. I mean, what Elias is saying is true. If we have an organization or multiple organizations that own a majority of our only economy, that can be dangerous in many different ways. And if nothing else, this does limit ownership of lodging in town, and I think we do just kind of need to think about what it looks like when Linkris, if the rumors are true, purchases, you know, a restaurant or purchases a store in town. So there, in some people's opinion, could be more done than this bill does, and I look forward to seeing how it goes at town meeting, and hopefully after that, whether it passes or not, the town will have more attention on it. So thank you.
Yeah, are there any questions?
Town council comment on this? Just to make
They
sure
drafted the general bylaw.
drafted
Yep.
the language.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, so the next few articles are transferring care and custody of property to the Conservation Commission from the Open Space Committee. First, Article 25 is 63 rear Howland Street to the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. The Open Space Committee recommends that that the town transfer care and custody of the property at 63 rear Howland Street, approximately 3.1 acres, to the Conservation Commission for ongoing maintenance and improvements. The property is adjacent to the Old Colony Trail and contains significant wetlands and endangered species habitat resources. Article 26, similar. The Open Space Committee recommends this article to dedicate the property at 2 Sandy Hill Lane, approximately 1/3 of an acre, for park, recreation, and conservation use, and transfer to the property, the Conservation Commission. This site, similar to the previous article, supports the diversity of upland and wetland habitats. Article 27, related again to Article 25 and 26. This is 30 Creek Road. If that sounds familiar, back in spring of 2022, town meeting voters approved funds to look at this town-owned property as potential parcel for housing or other municipal purposes. After analyzing the site, there were significant endangered species habitat limitations, and so the property is essentially not developable. Therefore, the town also agrees with this recommendation that 30 Creek Road go over to the care and custody of the Conservation Commission as well. And then Article 28 is transfer the custody of the Old Colony Nature Pathway, 61 Howland Street, to the Conservation Commission. In 95, town meeting voted to dedicate most of the parcel to park, recreation, and conservation purposes. In 2007, town meeting voted to name the parcel as the Old Colony Nature Pathway, indicating a preference for conservation purposes, and all other conservation properties in Provincetown are under the custody of the Conservation Commission, and this would transfer the management of the Old Colony Nature Pathway into alignment with other town-owned conservation lands. You may also be aware of ongoing conversation about the potential bike and pedestrian pathway on Old Colony path. I think the consensus from survey, feedback, community engagement, and the most previous public meeting is that plan and vision is no longer on the table. And so the select board and the administration also agree with the recommendation to transfer the Old Colony Nature Pathway to conservation. All right, Article 29, approval of the local comprehensive plan. This article would adopt the 2024 LCP, as it's called for short. It is available online if you'd like to learn more about the LCP. This has been 9 years in the making. It's gone through every town board. There's been dozens of community meetings, and the document is requested and required by the Cape Cod Commission, and it does require an affirmative vote of the town meeting body.
Thanks, Alex. On that one, on 29.
Yep.
This is John Keith. So I did read part of it. It's very long, detailed, and very well reviewed. I'm just curious. So this kind of like sets, as it said, as you said, obviously, and as it says itself, but just so I understand, this is a guidelines, but doesn't commit us to anything more specific than that. Would that be fair to say? And also, because like, for example, some of the data, pulls from the 2015 to 2019 ACS or something like that. Yep. So now, of course, we're at 20, whatever it is, 24 to 29 or whatever, 2019 to 2024. So you get my question, I think. So this is that what it is?
Yeah, so this is an aspirational, not a prescriptive document. And so there's some big picture vision stuff in the plan, but it's not, the LCP is not a plan that the town departments follow in terms of town goals. So there's a separate town goals process and town manager goals process, which is more prescriptive, which lays out the detailed goals around housing, climate, sewer expansion, public facilities. Again, this is aspirational, and a lot of it comes from feedback from the community and town boards themselves as to things we may want to aspire to accomplish. And we try our best to align some of the aspirations in the document to town goals. But it's not used as a measure of like annual goals that are adopted by the select board. Article 30 is a general bylaw amendment regarding stipend for select board members. So for, I think, at least a couple of decades, the stipend for select board members has been $2,000 a year. I've recommended that we increase that to $6,000 a year for all select board members, $6,500 for the chair of the select board. This follows our neighbor Truro making this change from 2,000 to 6,000 back in 2022. When folks consider running for select board, one of the limitations and obstacles is people's ability to give up work for a number of meetings. And so we're hopeful that this would encourage people from a broader range of socioeconomic backgrounds to run for office, be it childcare, giving up shifts, and things like that. All right, the next couple are zoning bylaw amendments. And so let me know if there are any questions. The first one is regarding accessory dwelling units. So we do allow ADU by right in Provincetown. We have had a number of property owners over the years have interest in putting an ADU on their property, but have been constrained based on setbacks and other constraints within our zoning bylaw. This would essentially make it easier for someone to fit an ADU on their property. It would reduce the setbacks required by 50%. As such, it would require a special permit from the planning board, and so the planning board would have to affirmatively grant permission for an ADU with a reduced setback. But we're hopeful that a number of property owners that are ineligible to construct an ADU would now be eligible to do so. The building commissioner, fire department, obviously the planning board would ensure that this is in compliance with other regulations in town. But this is an effort from the planning board to incentivize the further creation of units via ADUs. Article 32, another zoning bylaw amendment, historic preservation incentive. This is modeled after other towns in Massachusetts that have passed this bylaw out of respect and ambition for historical preservation. This would provide additional dimensional relief and/or new uses where it's necessary to preserve historic elements. So as an example, if there was a historic building in town that for some reason was demolished or damaged and it was a sort of pre-existing site, a developer, a builder, an owner of the property with our current zoning wouldn't necessarily be allowed to build the same building in its place. And so this bylaw would allow for that dimensional relief as long as it is in line with the building that was there historically. The town planner is not telling me I got it wrong, so it's good. Article 33 is another zoning bylaw amendment. Again, this is recommended and sponsored by the planning board, not by the select board or the town manager. This amendment would allow qualifying single-family property in the Res 1 district to obtain a permit for temporary occupancy of a recreational vehicle in order to have one occupied recreational vehicle parked within an off-street private driveway that is located more than 30 feet from the street and 15 feet from any property boundary. It's estimated that approximately 217 parcels could potentially host an off-street occupied recreational vehicle, and that 88% of these single-family homes are currently using a private septic system. We've gotten some questions about homeowners and homeowners associations that have covenants that don't allow recreational vehicles. This would not trump any covenants or bylaws that you have with a condo association or homeowners association. The covenants overrule any town bylaw. And again, this is a article sponsored by the planning board. And if there's any questions on this one, I know we've gotten some questions at different venues. So if there's questions, let us know. I know we have a planning board member here. Yeah, so this would require, I believe, a permit from the Board of Health, and you have to show an agreement between yourself and a waste hauler. So there would have to be someone to come pick up the waste. You'd have to show that agreement to the town to get the permit for the occupancy.
I'm on the planning board. We had a long discussion about this over a couple of evenings. So a recreational vehicle actually is regulated by the Department of Motor Vehicles and not by the building department. So that's why, as Alex mentioned, the waste dumping and any other regulation that has to do with recreational vehicles and where they are connected to dump or whatever is governed by that, not by the town, not by the building department.
And this is from, it would only allow occupancy from April 1st through November 15th. And I think from the discussion with the planning board, it's an effort to create additional seasonal housing potentially for folks that are in town as workers between April and November. All right, Article 34, the last zoning bylaw amendment regarding growth management. This aligns our growth management section regarding ADUs in line with the bylaw that town meeting passed this past October at special town meeting that removed the year-on deed restriction requirement for folks interested in building accessory dwelling units on their properties. And so again, this eliminates the deed restriction requirement on ADUs within the growth management section in town, while still allowing new ADUs to use gallons within growth management. So that is the last article in the warrant that is not on the consent agenda. So Articles 35 through 43 are annual articles, everything from the Cape Cod Greenhead Fly Control District assessment, Human Service Grant Program, Scholarship Fund, Cultural Council. Typically non-controversial items are placed under consent. And any town voter is able at town meeting to pull one and debate them and ask questions. But typically we vote for them as a package unless any voter stands up and asks for one of them to be removed. Any other questions about any of the bylaws or any of the articles that we mentioned? And I appreciate your patience at the beginning of the meeting with some of the technical difficulties. Just a reminder, town meeting is on April 1st, this coming Monday at 6 o'clock. We encourage folks, I think the doors open at 5 o'clock. There'll be registration. The school kids, I think, will still be doing a bake sale downstairs. Mary Jo, our moderator, typically still does a brief intermission in the middle to support the schools and the bake sale downstairs. And we will do our best to keep it to one night on Monday. Appreciate everyone coming.